They may be adventure mechanics, may be shooter mechanics, whatever it may be, but usually story is sort of like the thrust for interacting with other mechanics. And so what we tried to do was go like, how do we drill down as far into story so that it can become the mechanic, if that makes sense, like.
That was Sean Krankel, one of the two founding members of Night School Games, talking about Oxenfree in an interview. I believe this quote exemplifies why Oxenfree is so good. Oxenfree is a game where the story is the main mechanic, but to discuss the themes and what actually happens with the story, I have to spoil the entire game. And just from that quote alone, you can tell it's the main selling point. With that said, this game is free right now, and I implore you to play it. One playthrough can take 3.5 to 4.5 hours to complete the main story, but player be warned, you'll want to start from the beginning again once you finish the playthrough. Alright, let's talk about Oxenfree. You play as Alex, a girl stuck in a time loop where she must constantly relive the same night to stop the lost souls of a sunken submarine from taking over the bodies of her friends. After the night, all of Alex's friends leave safely and continue on with their lives, but Alex's consciousness is stuck reliving the same night forever. Your friends are Jonas, your new stepbrother, Ren, your childhood best friend, Clarissa, your deceased brother's ex-girlfriend, and Nona, the girl that Ren is interested in. If you didn't play the game and you aren't going to, I'll give a brief summary of what happens now. The game starts with Ren, Jonas, and Alex on a ferry to Edward Island, a decommissioned old military base with only one resident, Maggie Adler, who passed away recently. They are going there for a party on the beach to commemorate senior year. Only issue is that no one shows up except for Nona and Clarissa due to a large portion of kids getting picked up by the cops at a different party last week. While at the beach, Alex and Jonas take a radio to the caves to see a cool phenomenon that can happen if you tune in to the right frequency. When they tune into the right station, it teleports Alex and Jonas to the bottom of the sea to witness a submarine explode. This submarine was the USS Kanaloa, an experimental submarine that imploded after taking friendly fire. When they wake up again, they are at Hardin Tower in the middle of the island. Alex radios out for help and receives a radio back from Ren, who's lost in the woods, and Clarissa, who's at an old military base. Here you're given your first major choice. Who do you go find first? The rest of the night is spent solving time-bending puzzles and fighting against the ghosts of the USS Kanaloa, who Alex accidentally released with her radio. This all culminates in a choice for Alex. She can sacrifice herself, getting stuck in the time loop indefinitely, or give the ghosts Clarissa in exchange for her life. Regardless if you do this or not, the result will be the same. Alex will wake up on the boat going back to shore, and when they take a photo to commemorate it, she looks at it one last time, and this is what happens.
I left town to go to school. Undeclared. I need time to figure out what I want, I guess.
Oh no.
But anyways, what time is it? Yeah, sorry, I gotta run or I'll miss the ferry. Ren's dragging me out to Edwards Island for that yearly beach party thing, and I have to pick up what's-his-name Jonas, too. I hope he's not weird or mean or something. Whatever, I'm sure it'll be fun. It's something to do, right?
Oh, God.
Whoa, what an ending. In this game, your choices can also affect Michael, your dead brother. You can actually change the past and save his life. This goes to show the decisions you make are important, as they will affect the lives of your friends. There are 8 ways that your choices change the ending that you can receive, and from these 8 possibilities, there are 146 possible configurations. For example, I got on my first playthrough that Ren and Nona hooked up, that Alex and her stepbrother grew closer, that her brother stayed dead, that Clarissa survived and had forgiven Alex, but this is just me. I know that many people received a different first ending. And this is just another example of what this game does amazingly. It allows player choices to matter. In most narrative games, there are 2 or 3 endings, the good ending, the bad ending, and sometimes the 100% ending. This was a priority to the developers, and they even stated this in an interview.
But we kept going back to like, well, what does that have to do with communication? What does that have to do with all of that, And then kind of the other thing that we kept saying was like, most of these other choice-based games, usually the choices come down to a very serious kind of mortal moment of like guns in people's faces and who's going to die right now, or, I'm burning this village down or whatever. And so we were kind of like, what if we could make the conversation in the game feel as, I don't want to say familiar, but as naturalistic and easy a hurdle for the player to get over as possible.
With that said, Night School Games accounted for the completionists when they created their game as well. There's a secret ending that can happen as an after-credit scene. Before Alex, Ren, and Jonas go to the island, they receive a transmission on the radio from a version of Alex who's already stuck in the void, warning them to not go to the island, and they listen. Here, we don't know what state the story is in, if Michael is alive or dead, but we do know this version of Alex is the one who lives the rest of her life happy, as the other versions of her are stuck endlessly. And I felt a little guilty because of this. The choices I made saved one version of Alex, but damned the other. I believe this feeling, the feeling of guilt, is the main theme that the developers wanted the player to experience. In passive narratives, movies, books, and TV for example, the meaning of the piece of art is always considered and argued over. What was the intention of the director? What does this poem represent? What emotions does this piece evoke? A mentality that can and should be applied to active media as well. In active media, the player has a limited agency over the direction of the narrative, and they will feel more responsible for the outcome, and this can be used to a great effect. This is why Oxenfree's exploration of guilt is so palpable and hard-hitting. The player feels responsible for the outcomes of the characters, but first, let me prove that Oxenfree is about guilt. To do that, we only have to look at one person, Maggie Adler, the recently deceased inhabitant of Edwards Island. She is the person responsible for the USS Kanaloa's sinking. She was a radio communications operator, affectionately known as Radio Woman by the crew, and one of the few people who even knew the Kanaloa existed. One day, the crew's radio equipment started to malfunction, and it appeared that it was being jammed. She followed protocol and requested a scout and bombing if necessary. During this, she forgot that most ships don't even know about the Kanaloa, and then when they went looking for it and found an unidentified submarine, they fired on it and killed the entire crew. This can only be learned through notes that she left around Edwards Island, and they also reveal some other things. She feels guilty. She finds herself responsible for close to 100 people's deaths, and it weighs on her. When the ghosts start to cry out for help through the radios, she feels it's her duty to right her wrong, so she and her friend Anna research and investigate how to bring them back. Little do they know that the ghosts have turned malicious, and while trying to save them, they trap Anna in the void as well. This destroys Maggie, who dedicated her life after this to ensuring that nothing like this will ever happen again.
Incidentally, when I dream, it is usually during this time period, amidst the change, and I am trying to prevent Anna from ever coming. And you do not have to forgive me for my myriad failures, but please remember the name Anna Shea. Know that she did not deserve her fate.
But this is just the setting for the story, I hear you saying. Why is this important to Alex and what happens with her and her friends? Well, this is because Maggie Adler is a parallel for Alex. They both lose a close friend or family member, and they blame themselves about it. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but Michael drowned in front of Alex when he was trying to teach her how to swim one last time before he left for university. A common theme through the dialogue in the story is that Alex is to blame for what is happening to the group, that she should feel responsible for what happens to her friends. This guilt consumes her by the end of the story, and you can see this with the fact that over half of the players sacrifice themselves instead of giving the ghost Clarissa. The player will feel guilty seeing these people that they have come to care about suffer because of a mistake that they feel responsible for. So remember when I said I felt guilty because of the ending where you prevent the events from ever happening? Well, that's the New Game Plus 100% ending. So you have to play the game twice and collect all of the Adler notes the second time to receive this ending. Now this coming point is conjecture, but I believe Alex is only able to think past the guilt she feels for the choices you make and think about saving herself if she reads all of the Adler notes and realizes how trapping guilt can be. That while people should feel guilt, they should also try to move past it, not to forget and retain innocence, but to be able to live their own life again. When this happens, she's able to think of one last thing to do before she fades into the void, message herself on the radio, and tell her not to come. This ending is a full character arc for Alex, and I believe it ends the story in a very satisfying way. The people at Night School Games are great storytellers, and I have become a huge fan of theirs as I played through this and read up on them. I think their exploration of guilt and player choice in Oxenfree is going to be one of my favorite narrative games that's released through Epic Games for free this year. They have a new game coming out soon called After Party, and I can't wait to play through it.
They may be adventure mechanics, they may be shooter mechanics, whatever it may be, but usually story is sort of like the thrust for interacting with other mechanics. And so what we try